Michael, there you are. And can I also introduce Ali Kappa to you, who is also a fellow trustee. Ali was a returning scholar trustee from the 2013 scholarship group and was then elected as a trustee through a normal election process in 2016. Ali farms hops, eating apples, cider apples in partnership with her husband on the Herefordshire-Worcestershire border, and she has a portfolio of roles sitting on a number of industry boards supporting the horticulture sector, predominantly apples, hops and pears. So over to you, Ali.
Thank you very much. Wow, 3 really brilliant presentations. This is the last set of questions, so it's just us between you and lunch. Because we've had such a strong theme on food, I would just like to start by giving a big thank you to the team and the hotel that organised last night's dinner, because I think it was one of the best Nuffield dinners we've ever had. Although I question whether it had enough vegetables, but anyway. So I'm looking for questions. I'll take number 2 first.
Firstly, well done to the 3 of you. Excellent presentations. Nadine, a New Zealand scholar, and Barbara, we've studied the same area, and we've seen all around the world Western countries are facing these problems, and there's a myriad of work going on. Just interested from you whether you sort of came to any decision on whether this should be, where should the leadership come from in this kind of food policy, food strategy area? Do you think it should be industry-led or government-led? Can you give us some comments on that, please?
I have some comments, but I think in terms of a final decision, when I was at the Committee for Food Security in Rome, even they can't decide, so I figure that maybe they're a step ahead of me. But I think if you have a non-governmental body behind it, it's often better because you're seen as more impartial, but then the risk is that you have so many different people to placate and work with, you can't get a decision. But I found the Committee for Food Security making a great start, at least bringing civil society to the table, as well as the private sector and governments, and I think that's probably the best example that I've seen that, is already existing without having to create something new.
Question number 1.
I'm Ronald Angus. I'm a prospective scholar. I would like to ask Sarah, what do you regard as the key driver for siting a vertical farm? Is it having it in an urban setting where you've got proximity to the end-use market, or is it having the siting in a rural setting where you've got access to the infrastructure that will give you heat and power, such as an ED plant or a wind farm?
I think, going back to my final point, as opposed to looking at your setting, I'd look at your business model first. The problem with urban settings, and that's what we hear about a lot, and in fact I was at a conference last week talking for Savills about urban food. The problem with urban settings is the real estate is so expensive that if you look from a purely commercial point of view, you would not put a farm in the middle of London. It's just, that's why they're not there, because the land is so expensive. Again, so for me, it doesn't work as a food production model. For a rural location, you're talking about energy, and from what I've seen, that's the crux of it, the cost of the energy. So unless you can get your energy costs below a level that makes it commercially viable, it kind of doesn't really matter where you put it, because that is the main driver. And until that changes, for my opinion, I don't think it really works on a big scale. But I would like to say, I'm not saying that every model's rubbish, none of them work. This is just my views if I was doing it myself. And I think it does depend on individual models and what they're doing. But that would just be my general take on it.
Number 6.
Oh, sorry, I've got something to add.
Sorry.
When your added value from producing in a city is from being local. Your added value from producing in a city is from being local. If you plot your added value in monetary value, money, as a function of distance from the city, and plot land price as a function from the city, you're going to have a sweet spot somewhere in a peri-urban environment.
I'd just add one thing about that urban thing. If you stop looking at it as a food commodity, and you look at it maybe like you might look at investing in a gym in an urban centre, then, that could be a different model. But I was looking at producing food as a food, really. So, I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but, well, I am actually saying that. Yeah, I am saying that.
Question number 6.
Hello, Peter Moss, potential scholar. Barbara, I think, since the 1970s, red meat consumption in the UK has gone down dramatically, and diabetes and other associated diseases have gone up. There's now doctors, there's Dr. David Unwin, who's taking his patients to go on to a meat-only diet, cutting out vegetables and fruit and starch and everything. Are you open to the idea that maybe eating more red meat is maybe actually potentially a factor in helping our health and reducing our reliance on drugs and foods?
I'm really sorry, but I didn't quite catch the end of your question.
It's a strong accent. Basically, red meat is often demonised for causing diabetes and things.
Yeah.
Yet there is doctors who are advocating a meat-only diet, and they're having no diabetes drugs, and people are reversing type 2 diabetes through a meat-only diet. Are you open to the idea that that's potentially a benefit to help
I think
our diets?
as a nutritionist, we often feel a bit under fire because, people look at us and say, I saw you having a lemonade 3 weeks ago. What is wrong with you? You're not following an exact diet every single day, 365 days of the year. People are people and we're all different. What works for one person might not work for another. And when I refer to personalised nutrition, people are feeling failed by this whole generic public nutrition messages. They're going out and seeking solutions that work for them. And I think whilst some of it I really disagree with, because we're seeing young women who are stop drinking milk at an early age, they haven't substituted it with the correct thing, they're now at risk of osteoporosis. People are taking dangerous decisions with their health. And whilst, eating red meat is fine, if you cut out every single other food group, at some point that will come and find you. And I think it's about moderation, but we're not learning about moderation because we don't cook from scratch anymore. We're buying ready-made meals and things that are put in front of us. And I think there's nothing wrong with going and buying food that's ready prepared, but you have to understand that you have to have a range of foods. And the theme diversity came up for animals and for soil today. Well, we need diverse food supply as well as humans.
Okay. Question number 5.
Philip Hughes, 2000 scholar. I'd like to ask a serious question to Barbara, if I may. Could you give us a steer on the nutritional benefits of Frey Bentos for my kids, please?
This is a difficult situation. Shall I go with Mrs. Hughes' advice or shall I placate Phil? I'm just like I said, moderation.
Question number 2.
And convenience.
Thanks, Jack Ward, 2004 scholar. 3 very good papers to finish off the conference, so thank you very much for that. On Tuesday, a couple of us here have got a meeting with George Eustace, and there's a certain amount of interest in trying to persuade DEFRA to bake something about nutrition and health into the agriculture bill or the food strategy that's coming out next year. Now, I'm slightly unclear as to what the ask of DEFRA should be. And so, Barbara, I just wondered if you could help enlighten us. What specifically do you think we should be asking DEFRA to do that would help the nutritional challenges facing the population at the moment?
Well, I think DEFRA could start by crossing the road and going and have a chat with the Department of Health, because never the twain shall meet. And I think where I've seen that there are gaps, it's because the Department of Health, Department of Education, nobody talks to each other. They're very much in that silo mentality. And I think at least if you can understand what the health problems are, you can at least start looking at where the solutions are. And I think, yes, we can start saying that people have to have this much green in their diet and this much fat and so on and so forth. But you've got to look at how you can work together. And doctors are now starting to learn about nutrition, which they never used to. But we need to look at the whole food system. And we've talked a lot about it today in other talks, and people have mentioned that the food system is made up of several different areas. It's not just the food environment, it's not just the food chain. It's about looking at your environment and your education and production production, all those things coming together. And I think if DEFRA can at least recognise that it's not all about them, sorry, Jonathan, and have that dialogue with other departments, that will be a good start. And then you can start having constructive objectives that will say, let's have more fibre in our diet. So even though farmers in this country are growing way more fibre in raw materials, by the time it's passed through the food manufacturers' hands, there's not much left for us as consumers. And I don't know whether that's DEFRA's position or the health department, but somebody has to tackle it. But at the moment, they're not talking to each other.
Can I just say one thing I learned from my travels, and just going back to the point about the UK has got an amazing horticultural industry, and it's something that we don't hear very much about. And I also would say within Nuffield, because it's quite, due to the cross-section of who's here, we don't always hear the horticulture side. But having travelled around the world, and I'm sure you would both agree, we are at the cutting edge of horticulture. We can compete with anybody with the technology. And I just think we should appreciate what we've got to offer the UK consumer from our horticultural industry. I mean, I know I'm pushing an open door there with you, Alison, but, you know, it really is fantastic. And I think, you know, it would be good to have that a little bit more publicly acknowledged, the actual quality of food that we do produce there.
Actually, Barbara, there was something in your report, I think you framed that nutrition should be seen as a public good.
Well, I keep sort of thinking, is that the right way or the wrong way? Because I think it's all about perception, isn't it? And I think the outcome is that we eat a healthier diet. So if that means framing it in that way, then yes, fine, let's have it as a public good.
I'll just leave that thought with Jack. Question number 2.
Point of information, actually, whenever Barbara talks about DEFRA going across the road to the Department of Health, I don't think it's widely known that a lot of the Department of Health information is heavily skewed by large food manufacturers and is heavily biased in that respect. But to follow on from that, how do each of you think that you can get the right message across? In other words, avoid the fake and extreme stories.
Fake and extreme stories. Well, the little bit I said right at the end, I kind of added that in because I found I've done my presentation a few times and I felt, you know, quite clearly that my message was that, you know, don't believe all the hype. But I find I talk to people and then they kind of a few minutes later come back and say, yeah, but, you know, isn't vertical farming amazing? And then it's going to solve all our world problems. And then I think, people, you know, there's obviously a disconnect and it's like they want to believe that this is the future and the magic bullet. So I don't feel I have the answer of how to get people not to believe the hype. And, you know, I think we all probably remember the .com boom. It's more about questioning, asking the right questions. Don't just assume that what you read in a newspaper article, and it's not that I'm, you know, we do seem to be going on and on about the press, but don't always believe the figures you read. You know, you question them and you say, where are those from? Where is that energy figure from? And where are those production costs coming from? And I think that's all you can do is just ask people to question.
The Gartner hype cycle scientifically categorises this, what you're talking about. It does happen. I'm not read up on how to change it. But you can take advantage of the hype cycle. There's opportunity when things are overhyped and there's opportunity when things are underhyped. If you understand where the industry's at, you can take advantage of it and use it to benefit your business. On a wider scale, how to stop it? Communism, maybe?
I might just focus on the message, can't really follow that, but I think in terms of the message, it's also about where the message goes. So I think with my message, I've focused on multidisciplinary working, so people move away from silos and we focus on the nutrition smart outcomes. But if you take the message to the right people and push on a swinging open door, that's a lot easier. So again, going back to what Catherine said about the Committee for Food Security, that is one good place to start because it's at the top and it's trickling down to UN and then national government and then to everywhere else. And you're meeting with a lot of NGOs and people like that who you wouldn't normally spend time talking to because they're not in your immediate industry or or, sitting across the table from you on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, I've got 4 questions and 5 minutes, so can we keep them really quick so we can get everybody in? Number 6 first.
Peter Wiggins-Davis, 2016 Nuffield Scholar. Barbara, thank you for a very easy to digest presentation. My question relates to this idea that education doesn't appear to be working at the moment. The government has been playing and talking about various different sugar taxes. Do you believe that is the answer?
No, I think we've gone into this whole area of banning stuff because we can't manage it. And, I remember being a teenager and being told if I couldn't do something, it makes you want to do it more, doesn't it? And I had an opportunity to have a behind-the-scenes tour of a restaurant recently, and they showed us the Coca-Cola volumes that they're selling on a daily basis. And we said, oh, have you not been affected by the sugar tax? They said, no, people just pay the higher price. So just banning stuff and taxing it is one tool. It's not a silver bullet like we've all been talking about. You need a range of different tools within the public health, within education, within all different areas that work together. And if you just come at it from one angle, you're missing so many different opportunities. And, whilst it might be convenient and make certain government departments look good if they ban something, there'll be a consequence further on down the line that's unintended that means you don't get to the outcome that you wanted.
Thank you. Number 1.
Michael Priestley, I'm a journalist who needs to get his backside in gear, apparently. Question for Michael. How do you manage academic rigour to improve on-farm vigour? It rhymes, sorry about that.
If I understand your question right, how do we motivate the academics to do something useful? It all starts with motivation. If you want to progress your kit, if you want to do well in your career, you meet goals that will progress your career, and that's scientific purpose. There's very little emphasis put on real industry impact. Give them instead of rewarding them for academic purpose, let's reward them for industry impact, measurable industry impact. So it could be carbon reduction in farms. It could be reducing the need for labour in hours. If you give them something you can measure, they can progress based on the measurement. Now, that isn't suited to all academics. Some stuff, you do need to work on stuff that's not useful now, and there are examples of that paying off many years later.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Number 5.
Hi Sarah, Robert Borrell, 94 Scholar. As an AD landlord with a surplus of heat, electricity and CO2 for sale, are there lots of people trying to get into the industry? And if so, I've got a shed I would like to rent out.
I think there are loads of people that would like to get into the industry, but to set up a big-scale vertical farming system, you're talking millions of pounds, millions and millions. So that's why all the ones you read about are the kind of big aerofarm investors, and they are looking at kind of global investment. At the other end of the scale, and Mike probably knows a little bit about this, you've got more of your smaller shipping container end, but those don't have the scalability. So I'm not saying it's not going to be there, I'm just not sure we're quite there yet. However, things like co-location with excess energy, excess CO2, like AD plant producing nutrients, there definitely is a link up there. It's just taking it to that next level to get there, I think, if that answers. So not just yet, perhaps.
If you've got any contacts, please pass them.
Okay. Well, the HRH did talk to me about cannabis farming yesterday, so I'll... I haven't got his number, though. So.
I think that's it. I don't think there was one other question, but they seem to have stood down. Thank you all very much, everybody, for listening. I think that we've had 3 really excellent presentations to finish off the conference. And thank you for great questions. Well done.